All right, let's call for the opening of this meeting at 9:12 p.m. or 9:14 p.m. then. Let's proceed to the adoption of the agenda. I move that the agenda be adopted as presented, seconded by Councillor Lalonde. Yes. Any additions or deletions? We might remove item 5.1 and 5.3. I believe we've already discussed these particular subject matters, Mr. Mayor. Well, that's fine. Should I also add an update with regard to the fire stations? Concessions to fire stations? Yes. Well, fine then. All those in favor? Carried. Should we not include announcements? Well, I believe we've already dealt with announcements in the previous meeting. It could be dealt with through delegations if you wish. Let's go on now to declarations of pecuniary interests. Let's go on now to delegations, presentations, and announcements. Councillor Laverne. Mr. Mayor, in my ward, the Chinnehammon citizens are preparing a St. Valentine supper along with a dance accompanying the supper, sponsored by the Knights of Columbus. Wednesday, 7th of February, also, a supper for the retired individual will be organized. Again, you can consult the Optimist Club at their website for further details. You're going to be singing, I believe, at St. Valentine's during the St. Valentine's Day festivities, shall you not? Yes. Yes, I will, apparently. You haven't heard him sing yet, have you, folks? Well, announcements? Other announcements? Yes, let's just change subjects a tad bit. On the 18th of February, the Clarence Creek Carnival. I was invited to the official opening. I don't know if you received the invitation yourself, Mr. Mayor. Well, I heard about this over the radio this morning, actually. Well, Councillor Lalonde comes around, when he feels like it. It's going to be on Friday at 8 p.m. Saturday, there's going to be a supper and a show along with Maurice Guru. Tickets were all sold off in 36 hours. It was a record, actually. There's a lack of space, really, in the room that will be housing that event. And on Sunday, there will be family-oriented activities along with inflatable games and so on and so forth. It's going to be the retirement persons that will be celebrating a type of activity or an activity on this coming Thursday. Also casino night, and Sunday there's going to be an ice race, a race on ice with cars. So 2 weekends and 2 coming weekends and 2 weeks that are quite fun-filled for all residents there. Any announcements? Well, I certainly have questions, but no announcements at this time, Mr. Mayor. Let's go on now to petitions. Item 5.2, request from Judith and Denis Morin, further to the opening of Sterling Street. I believe this is something that we spoke about that relates to the MPAC matter. Councillor Grimard, I know it was something forgotten in all of this. The letter was sent sometime in October. Now, given the letter that was sent to us, oh, I'm sorry, yeah, that's it. Is there a reason why this was brought to council much before it should have been brought to council? Because it had been in the on the back burner from October to now, and then we received a letter to town council. Somebody also sent an email, but is there a reason why nothing occurred in between October and this date for this matter to appear before council? Well, we had to take time to revise the matter. I'm in contact with our counsel at present, our legal counsel. I understand. I believe that the answer to be given to the lady that made such a request is to appear before the MPAC board. This was relayed to her? Yes. So we have nothing to do with that. The onus is upon them to appear before the MPAC committee. What happens is that she stated that the value of her house had decreased, but MPAC makes the final decision as to this. Mr. Mayor, I performed a bit of research. I was told that their property had decreased in value in keeping with the letter we received, and I can tell you that's quite true. It was assessed as $361,000 in 2017, and 2018 it's $224,000, a difference of $36,900. But before this came before council, she had applied for a decrease for handicap access that was afforded to that house. And I figured that with $36,000 less, given the last year's tax rate, she had a savings of $405, given last year's prevalent tax rate. So she's going to recover the value of the house that she's living in. She's going to be paying less taxes. But to state that it decreases the value of her home, if I take a look, let's say, at the Burgel project, when I heard them say that there was a field at the back, there were trees at the back that needed to be cut, the same rule applies. And I remember that we had a similar case that occurred on Catherine Street. People don't want to have any neighbors, but look, in this particular case, this is a road that's going to cater to the needs of the population at large that lives in that area. So the reduction her appeal with regard to the reduction in the assessment of her establishment, I do question, really. We'd received 200 signatures for this particular road. That was prior to the public meeting that was held, and I believe that we certainly listened to what the population had to tell us, and MPAC will be called upon to decide this. So I was told that steps have been undertaken. Is someone within the town administration make sure that a letter is sent to the persons that raised this subject matter so that we can answer it appropriately? Yes, yes. Councillor Bourlinguette. A notice of motion. Yes, whereas the Municipal Council, at the request of the Fire Department, approved Bylaw 2017-155, Appendix C, Core Emergency Response Services of the Clarence-Rockland Fire Department on December 4th, 2017. And whereas the response services to be provided by the bylaw include special services, water and ice rescue, and that other municipalities in Ontario which have agreed to provide these services have found themselves struggling to better define the costs and implications. Be it resolved that Council requests a report from the Director of Protective Services, Fire Chief, that will clearly stipulate that the level of service being offered is simply a continuation of a service already offered by the municipalities' protective services. Also clearly define that the level of service be offered is primarily the training of fire department personnel so that they are prepared to respond to ice and water rescue emergencies. No human resources will be assigned to these services except as part of an emergency response. Also clearly stipulate that the offering of these services and the training required to offer them will not incur any additional costs to the city. That is, there will be no additional compensation, training bonuses to the personnel. Be it resolved that Council accepted the report from the Director of Protective Services, Fire Chief, will be incorporated into Bylaw 2017-155, Appendix C. Thank you. Do you have any additional comments? So I'm asking you to, if you could, basically, if this wording is fine, use it, but incorporate these into our bylaw, to exactly define exactly what we mean by ice and rescue. Well, I think we've determined that before, but the highlight simply says that we offer water and ice rescue. But what does that mean? Are we going to continue to train our volunteer firefighters to be able to perform that. Is that all it means, or does it mean anything else? And the way I understand things right now, we are not giving these firefighters any compensation to perform these duties. So, if it's in the bylaw, they might come back and say, well, they want compensation. I might want to be clear that this is not the intention. I don't want to. Well, I could be wrong. I'm just trying to find where you're trying to go with this, and maybe what we vote is that whatever we were doing, we keep on doing. And other municipalities have done that. So what's wrong with this? Well, it wasn't clearly defined. If it works, it works. Can you go somewhere with this? Well, I guess, Mr. Mayor, we provided a second report for council's determination to determine rescue levels, and we had discussions at that time trying to determine that prior to bringing back and establishing bylaw that council adopt something that would establish one level of water and ice rescue that will provide based on certain water conditions. I think we've gone through and explained what the department really does, and the report was accepted by council and provided similar action. And we tried what we did, copy the exact language into the established and regulating bylaw. Again, this is a level of service that we've been providing for a number of years. Well, we're not doing anything extra. We're already doing whatever we've always done. We're trying to better accommodate the same service that we were offering in the past. That's all. But 2 years ago, if you go back 2 years ago, 1998, or 20 years ago, 1998, the Ministry of Correctional Services came out with a memo to municipalities stating that delivery of water, ice, and rescue services is not a fire department responsibility unless the service is clearly defined and authorized by the council in a fire department establishing bylaw. Now you see, this brought this about. I have a feeling that this was raised by fire departments to the Ontario government, stating, who's responsible for this? They wanted a clear definition, and they were told go back to individual municipalities and ask them. Mr. Wilson, Mr. Mayor, the provision of any level of service by any fire department is dictated by council. Council has the ability to control whatever level of service you want to see from the fire department. In water rescue is an example of that. The public safety guideline that the councillor referenced was presented to council as part of the report and was part of our inclusion in that discussion back in the fall when we discussed selected and ice water rescue capabilities. I would agree absolutely with the councillor's point. Like anything, it's a decision of council what level of service we want to provide. We've had extensive discussion on that at council at that time. Now, to your point, Mr. Mayor, you are correct. This is a level of service that we have been providing, perhaps not correctly, in that it has not been clearly identified in our establishing and regulating bylaw, and we've tried to tidy up those loose ends by stating that in our bylaw. We've been training our firefighters for a number of years. We have had a boat in the river for a number of years. Those are all recognized in our master fire plan. It was adopted by council last year, and I don't know if there's anything new or surprising here. We're just negotiating new contracts, new negotiating agreements with both of my bargaining units, and there has been no discussion of any additional compensation or anything along those lines. So I guess I'm just trying to understand what the concern is. I think I perceived during the course of the flood last year that there was a bigger boat. It was a bigger boat than I thought. There were 3 firemen in that boat, and I said to myself, oh my gosh, it's more dangerous for these firemen being in that boat than what they're trying to do. So having a bigger boat, better trained, what my concern is that I'm looking at other municipalities. Everyone, one by one of those municipalities, this has been brought to their attention. Some have adopted something in their bylaws, some have not. But those are issues that they didn't consider at the time. Let me give you one example. In the city of Windsor, Ontario, this is an article from last year or a few months ago. The Windsor Star. This summer, we had included in the budget $40,000 in training for firefighters in water and rescue. And the article goes on to explain, and again, I'm just reading what's in the article. What we have here is a community that's being held by a ransom by a powerful union that insists to give preference to their people whose salaries will exceed $100,000, with the condition that firefighting services be offered within the constraint of their own budget. Little wonder when the service asked an additional $40,000 to cover additional bonuses for other individuals who were trained to carry out water services. Now, look. After they agreed to put it in a bylaw, then the fire department, which initially say, no, it won't cost you anything more, came back and says, well, we need special training, $45,000. I want this to happen here. Mr. Wilson. Mr. Mayor, I hear the councillor's points. Windsor went through a particularly difficult challenge in labor relations, especially during the last few years. They are a career-oriented department. A few departments have a lot of odd language that predate a lot of stuff in regard to training bonuses and all of that. I would suggest for council considerations, if here in the municipality would simply be a matter of municipality to change in its bylaws saying that you don't want this level of service, but I don't know in this point in time to try and add something into that that it will accomplish anything that the council wishes to do. There's nothing to stop a bargaining agent to say, well, we want to try and negotiate something. I mean, that's the nature of negotiations. But at the end of the day, as mentioned, we've just settled grievances with both of those parties. Both parties are aware of the bylaw that's been in place. Both parties have been aware of the level of service that we've provided in the municipality for the last 12 plus 15 years almost. So I'm not sure that there's any reason to be concerned at this point. But like I say, I don't know what will happen at the bargaining table. At the end of the day, we work within the mandate that's established by the council. Well, it's up to council to deal with it, but why don't we put it clear right now? We put it in clearly right now, clearly defined, if we're concerned with this, that we are approving these services because we want continuation of services that do exist. What's the harm of simply adding this into the bylaw, making it clear that there should not be any, that there won't be any additional compensation to be paid for the training of individuals, unless they come back and say, well, let's say if they ask, additional funds, and we can reevaluate at that point in time. I could see the councillor's point. However, there's nothing stopping a negotiation from demanding whatever it wants to demand, regardless of whether we have a bylaw or not. At the end of the day, we manage an insane amount of risks within our municipality, and I think this is one of those risks that we have to manage. We could change the bylaw, and you know what? I would vote for changing the bylaw and amending to put your comments in there. I have no problems with that. By the same token, nothing stops us or stops them from negotiating, and our bylaw would mean nothing in our negotiations. I would appreciate if this be included regardless. I have no problem with that. Well, I have problems if there's better training in 5 years or 3 years that requires the city to spend more money to better train our people. I don't want a bylaw that will have to be discussed stating, okay, we're not supposed to do anything extra, and then this training, well, we enter into the point. I think that that was alluded to. I think that we have flexibility that allows us, well, we have new suits available, we have new training that we can offer, and we ultimately make a decision. If it's yes, it's yes. If it's no, it's no. Bargaining, it has to come to us. We have to negotiate. So I like the bylaw because it clearly defines, and we had this a problem with this ice and rescue matter. We covered it very well, I believe. And if there's better training somewhere that comes down 5 years down the road, it's costing us X thousands of dollars more. I want to have the flexibility to say, well, you know what? I want our firefighters to be properly trained or better trained. We'll have to come back to council and generate reports on top of reports. If they want something more than what they have, they'll have to come back. Well, it was all approved in the master plan. We didn't change anything. I don't see why we have to change anything at this point. Councillor Levert, I believe that we purchased good equipment. We have to go ahead with the training. I mean, if we do need training, well, they're already trained. They're already trained, Mr. Levat. Yes, but staff changes and we have to retrain them. It's normal. It's normal. Well, I propose that we go on to a vote. Well, it's a notice of motion that doesn't call for a vote. I see. It's a notice of motion. Doesn't call for a vote. Notice of motion then. Let's go on to another one. presented by Councillor Michel Levert, whereas Mr. Ellie Gosson had a verbal agreement in 2012-2013 with Council to allow CRT customers to have access to his parking lot located at 538-542 Russell Road for improved safety. And whereas these were shared advantages for the city and Mr. Gosson, in that this arrangement would attract customers to his gas bar and restaurant, whereas Mr. Gosson has approached the city for consideration of a benefit that the city had in having access to his property. Be it resolved that the city provide $3,000 to Mr. Gosson to reflect the use of the land over this period, and these funds be applied to Mr. Gosson's tax arrears, roll number 0316016 0110 07401 0000. Be it further resolved that the $3,000 be funded from the corporate contingency account. Seconded by Councillor Lalonde. Yes, I do have a question here. I believe that we can create quite a precedent if we enacted this. I looked into this matter today. An example: the parking lot located beside the McDonald's. Taxes are quite high. We don't give him any 1 red cent in tax back, and the parking lot also behind the water treatment plant we make use of each and every year, and we've never reimbursed taxes. I say that if there's something to be done, we can say this. As of 2018, we can do something. I took a look at this parking lot, and it's far from being comparable to the parking lot beside the McDonald's. You can at least park 50 cars. Yes, but you see, if you give them a tax-free bypass, as we did for the snow dump, well, I believe we'll be creating a precedent, and I'm in agreement with you, but I believe this was an understanding that was arrived at with this individual. Mr. Jubainville? Well, I have no further information than what was given out tonight. Councillor Zant? I'm completely in agreement with Councillor Lalonde. I'd just like to add something. We certainly appreciate the fact that Mr. Gosson afforded us this privilege to ensure the safety of people taking our public transportation, buses. But of course, that stimulated business at his place of business for people waiting at the bus shelter and stuff like that. I would thank him for his nice gesture, but we should not write off $3,000 from his. That was $3,000 removed from an interest rate of interest that he was still owing us. I know, but in the grand scheme of things, it's nothing really. But like what he said, we might create a precedent. Up to what point do we stop giving grants or handing out credits to individuals that should not have them or receive them? You know, if I recall correctly, there in Cheney, people took the bus on Russell Road, and there was a parking facility there. So who's in favor? Who is in favor? I believe this is still a notice of motion, so it's up for discussion, and that's all. Did he sell the land, by the way? Yes, I believe he sold the land. Okay, let's go on to the report from the United Cadres of Prescott and Russell. Let me tell you that we made a presentation at the Roma Convention. Counties were in attendance, were in full attendance. The mayors were there to support us with regard to our request. Mr. Crack also appeared to make his own comments. We're trying to contact the federal authorities because the provincial authorities are blaming the federal authorities for not moving. We're caught in the midst of a tennis match here. Well, we should be meeting a federal minister, Bob Chiarelli, because we're trying to make headway prior to elections being called. And I spoke to counties, and they agree in partnering with us. I spoke to them to allow us to meet the Ministry of Transportation, and during that self-same day, the Prime Minister. Even though the counties are not present, we'll ask them permission to do so, just to be polite, and we'll attend those meetings ourselves because this issue concerns Clarence and Rockland more than anyone else. So we'll continue pushing things along. We do have a question period that we have to deal with. Let's go on now to reports. I'm sorry. Oh, this gentleman, we had a question period last time around. I only have, well, step forward and ask the question. Listen, I'm a stickler for rules, Mr. Mayor. Yes, my question, you'll find it quite simple-minded. I have difficult, I'm hard pressed to believe this. I attended the meeting last time around, and my question is simple-minded. I am always simple-minded. I've always said that. I've never said that of you. How can I be deemed a legal outlaw? I don't know. I'm sure you'll tell me. I'm just asking you. You see, the zoning change that was enacted during the last time when you enacted it involved 3 dogs, and this lady has 12 dogs. This lady was accusing me of being a troublemaker. I'm wondering why I'm being sued when I break the laws, and this lady was deemed not guilty. What am I asking you? We're talking about the Rolin Road zoning change that was approved last time around. I just wanted to understand the... Okay, that deals with... That's a Committee of Adjustment matter. She was applying for a zoning bylaw, and she already has dogs at home, and we limited the number of dogs she could keep. Well, your bylaw allows people only to keep a maximum of 3. Well, she's asked for more. She's applied to obtain a kennel club. Well, why could she be granted this before she obtains a license per se? Look, when I built a house without having a permit, why was I sued? But she wasn't sued, and yet she's guaranteed a kennel certification. How can I become a legal outlaw? Mrs. Collier, with regards to the dog matter, well, the dog bylaw within Clarence and Rockland was modified in 2015, sir. The bylaw states at present that it's not possible to have more than 3 dogs in a residentially zoned area. This lady has 12 dogs, but she lives in a rural area. Oh, so this is not just one whole municipality. There are different zoning provisions applied to different areas. Fine, Mr. Mayor, but this is rural. Why does she have a right to ask for a zoning bylaw change to operate her kennel? She didn't. She's in a rural area, and she didn't need to go through that process, but she did. So there's no limit to keeping a number of dogs in a rural area, because you closed one up in a rural area. He was closed up because he didn't have the right to keep animals in the barn that he was living in, or a barn establishment. She has a number of acreage that will support a kennel to support these animals, sir. But Mr. Lavoie did not have the necessary acreage. We're talking about a severance of a barn from a residence on a small piece of property. It was very well specified when severance was requested that no animal would reside in that barn. He had the right to keep 1, 2, but no more than 3 dogs. But when I was sued in court, when I built my house, in the document that the Department of Construction issued to me, sir, it was not specified that I needed an engineer's plan. That was not. And they sued me. Well, I didn't pursue that action, but I have the right to be respected. It cost me a lot of money, and that put a stop to my construction. And they wanted my house to be demolished. Roland, I'm the one to negotiate with you to lower a few rates. It didn't lower anything. I paid the debt owing. But there were some fees attached to that, not just debts. Well, the lawyers' billing documents were included in all of this. I just want to finish matters tonight, Roland. Well, I've been hearing about rules and regulations since I've been yay tall. I'm asking you again, how can individual step onto my daughter's land and cut the trees there? We made an offer, well, to your daughter. Look, you may. What did you say to the public in front of the citizens that were in attendance? You had money. Yes, Salvation was. The South Nation was planting trees. Let South Nation plant trees. It's a minimum of 1,500 trees that we're talking about with regards to the South Nation Authority. Now I've just stopped talking. I'm just asking questions as to how I become a legal outlaw. I have no idea. You have to consult a lawyer for that. Right now, you've expired. Your 3 minutes have expired. So the lawyer will tell me why I've become a legal outlaw. Look, well, next meeting I want an answer. You will not. I won't give you an answer as to that. Go consult your lawyer. No, no, I want to consult our legal counsel. Let's go on to committee staff reports. 9.1, the Smart Cities Challenge. You want me to read this, Mr. Mayor? Whereas Infrastructure Canada announced the Smart Cities Challenge to regional governments and autonomous communities throughout Canada. And whereas there are 4 prizes varying from $5 to $50 million for the winning prizes, and whereas the City of Clarendon-Rockland has the intent to submit to this its participation in this program, be resolved that a formal application be made as of April 2018 being the limited date. Does this need to be limit date for submission? Yes. First off, Mr. Mayor, this is a great initiative, and I'm really happy that we're actually going about it. My question is kind of a two-pronged because I think it would be a very important step to acquire help to fill out this. You understand what I'm saying? You know, I think that many of these tenders, many of these submissions that we actually go for, we don't actually end up getting. And I would like to make sure that we are successful, well, as much as possible. And I think that that's done with someone with experience, specifically with someone who's filling out these submissions. And we, on another note, I don't think it would be a bad idea to actually, at the end of the year, or maybe twice a year, to obtain, something from the city to actually say, here's the so many submissions we applied for, and here's how many we were successful at and how many we failed at, because I think there are a lot of funds to be had out there, and I don't think that we necessarily think, how we know about getting about it and how we know about filling out a submission that is a winning one. Well, recently, we have been successful with the grant applications we've been filling out. The CWWF, that's what the acronym stands for, to get the water looping. It took a couple of tries, and finally, given this final submission, we were successful with. But that there were a lot of ministers that were involved? No, no. Actually, we made presentations. Well, there were a lot of presentations made, yes. Yes, that's right. And infrastructure funding, yes, we've been successful in our applications there. Now, on the smaller grant side, we were not as successful for a couple of the small ones, but I think that you're seeing now that Martin has been being successful on some of the cultural ones, and for Canada 150. And we're at an awkward age. It's like buying clothes for a 14-year-old. The size of 25,000 might not warrant all that much success because of the amount of money given out to larger municipalities. But this particular grant application, and I'm not sure what you're referring to in terms of getting resources. Well, just assistance with someone who's got a lot of experience, in filling out these, because you're missing one word in there, that's enough to disqualify you. And I think that for something this big, yes, I think it's worth. Let's not forget also that we had a meeting with all the directors being present to deal with ideas from everyone to ponder ideas that are given up by anyone. I'm not saying that this is not important. I'd hate to be disqualified because of a technicality. You see, the process that we have right now is this. There are three categories, one for a very large amount of money, one for 5 million, and there are two 10 million amounts that could be applied for. So we can only apply for one of them. So we're looking at the ideas right now, and that application will have to be filed, let's say, as of April 24th, which is the limit date. We've asked Mr. Darch to help us with this. He has a lot of experience in applying for grants. And I believe that the reason that we were successful with the process with the Clean Wastewater Fund and the other one is that he completed the application. He has an extremely good skill at writing out those submissions, and we'll actually be meeting with the project lead with regard to the project with the federal government on Thursday to learn more from that person. That's the person I met in Toronto at the Roma convention. He agreed to meet with us. We have a little advantage in that we're actually in the Ottawa region. It's easy to meet with her. So we're planning to do everything that we can. Now, since you've mentioned that, today we've received something about getting someone to help us. Now, there's an organization or company called Bang the Table. They're communication experts, and they want to come in and to implement a fancy approach with the community, but they don't fill out the grant application. They want to charge $10,000. So, exactly, yes, I know. I feel a little more comfortable knowing that Mr. Darch was going to be involved in this. I wasn't aware that he was going to be involved. It's not saying that I don't have confidence in anyone here. I just want to make sure that we give the best submission possible. And it's also a matter of having time. So we've reallocated a bit of his time saying, okay, this is what we're going to do, because he has a strong ratings skill, as you're well aware. This is now his priority, and we're working on fleshing out the three ideas that you're seeing there. The directors have until tomorrow to get in the details of the plan. I must say, Mr. Wilson had many ideas on that day. Were they all about votes? Well, or no, it was not. All right. Shall would have never said that. Okay, okay. When we arrived at Roma, he said, "Do what you can do what you want." And I was there. I was there ahead of him. I said, "Well, you're coming with me." He says, "No, no, I want to go over there." I said, "No, no, you're coming with me right now to meet this lady. Full steam ahead." Any other questions then? Mr. Lalonde, I spoke to Dave with regard to this today. He's the one that phoned me up. What's most important in those submissions or those requests, as I've explained to Dave, is this. We need to truly understand what's important for them, what they wish to finance, what's the financing trend, and they have an assessment grid that they rely upon. And we have to weigh in on the criteria set out in this grid, and to compare this with the projects that we wish to implement to determine how those projects can be worked into this. We might have a super nice project, but if it's not within their own priorities, that's why Mrs. Collier will meet the lady in charge to determine where their priorities are. I just want to make sure that all hands are on deck for that. Oh, all hands on deck. Well, that's a new one. All hands on deck. All right then. All right. So we shall proceed. Moved by Councillor Zant, seconded by Councillor Levert. All those in favor? Carried, and thank you. Next item, addition of a new conference room and relocation of staff lunchroom at City Hall. Councillor Levert, that the Committee of the Whole recommend to Council that it authorizes the transfer of $20,000 from the reserve fund to the operational budget for 2018 for the Rockland City Hall to pay for the costs of a new conference room and to relocate the staff lunchroom as recommended at City Hall. Seconded by Councillor Grimard. Any questions? Yes, Councillor Berlinguet. He had his hand raised first. Well, in the budget, we had a proposal that asked something similar to obtain funds, to revamp offices. And that was the only item that we said in the budget that we were going to consider. Now, I don't understand why we've rehashed this into coming back with a new request for additional funds to renovate this room. There was an individual that asked for additional funds to revamp his kitchen equipment, and I told him, as we told him, that we're going to wait for the next budget. Well, I like that we do something with this room. I would certainly not be in favor of this room remaining empty, but I'm opposed in converting this as a conference room. What I envision is this. All of the upper floors, the clerk, your office, the mayor, to build handicapped accessible rooms. But we're talking about the basement area, not the upper part. You're alluding to the upper floors. We're talking about the basement rooms. Okay, well, what are we doing with the main floor? Well, nothing right now. I think it's important for you guys to be accessible. But they don't have to go up to the top floor. Nobody has to see what's going on. I'm not saying it's private, but there are some confidential documents there. Okay. So at budget time, we asked for funds to hire a consultant to get the best use out of that space. It's a lot of space, and we should use it in the best way possible. We can have a whole pile of ideas, but then you might hire someone to draw the ideas and then implement them. Yes, we turned that down because obviously once we had the consultant, we come back in and then we say we need $200,000 to do the renovations. So, Pierre Boucher approached me and said, we really need a meeting room because we have the small admin room upstairs, which is very difficult to put a lot of people in, and the other room that we have is not much more functional. We are now having monthly developer, or bi-weekly at least, development meetings where we have about 20 people come. So that's nothing fancy involved. We're just painting. We're buying a table because right now we have plastic tables and there are no chairs in that room. They're like high school wooden chairs. So if we have developers in, it's not quite right, really. I understand. So we need a bigger place to meet. The room is very, very functional for that and accessible for all. So the staff lunchroom is not big enough for our staff right now. And because the kitchen was there for the daycare, it made a lot of practical sense to reuse the kitchen. And the money that we're spending, we're buying tables and chairs. That's pretty well what we're buying right now. So we aren't planning to redo the whole daycare space. It was just a very minimal amount. Mr. Boucher approached me and I said the only way to make this clear, because council turned down the consultant money, we have to go to council and get permission to spend this. So this is not money this is literally, you just want to take 20,000, you already have the plan, you're just going to put it into place. That's right. All we've got is painting. Oh, I didn't know it was in that far. I was thinking of something else here. Yes. I totally agree with a lunchroom. They don't have a place they can eat at. Have you seen the lunchroom right now? Yes. The only concern with their waiting room is this. And I know it's not built yet. It's going to be a huge room with a new fire station. So you're asking money to build a small one, which I assume that you want to be as permanent as possible, and yet in a couple of years we're going to have a room that's going to hold a lot, multi-service room, and I believe we want to also offer it to the residents. but I understand that it's not a lot of money. The only concern that I do have is that in a few years we're going to have a huge conference room. It's not a lot of work. There's not a lot of work involved to tear it down and do something else with it. But I would not have any problems with a lunchroom. You need a place where you can eat that is properly set up for that. Can I just say this? Go check it out. It's a room where kids were before. It's just been painted over. We're not building anything. All we're doing is basically buying paint and paper and wallpaper. I understand your point. The room that we're going to have, the fire hall, I assume it's not. We're not going to put in a gigantic table, to accommodate 100 people. So I believe then we're talking about a different setting in this particular instance. It's a setting similar to what we have right here, a bit bigger. Well, hopefully bigger. Yes. Well, next time you're there, I have to take 5 minutes to show you what the room is because it's a very pleasant looking room. You have nice windows, and we're painting it and putting in tables and chairs. What is the square footage that we have down there? I believe it's 2,500 because it's 5,000 in total, you see. Yes, 2,500. The room, that room you mean, or the whole floor? Well, it's pretty hard to determine what is what. I haven't visited the place. We'll have to take you there. The reason I bring that up is that I agree with the lunchroom and the conference room if both of them can accommodate the space available downstairs, but upstairs, definitely, definitely. The people that we have on the third floor at the city hall should move over there so that it would be accessible. I cannot believe at the present time that a businessman that would come and meet with the mayor has to go downstairs, go up 3 stairs, and he doesn't have a table in his office. I can't believe this. I wholeheartedly agree with you, and that's what we intend to do, is to make the most efficient use of this space. So that's fine then. Yeah. Mr. Levert, I went to visit the room myself this week. It makes sense. Go and take a look at the room. It's quite big, and the lighting that's there. And after that, I went upstairs, accessing the entrance that is wheelbase friendly, and there's a lot of activities that's going there. It wouldn't take all that much to make this room that could be multi-purpose made. Maybe a mayor's room, mayor's office. Well, Mr. Berlingat is over and done with now. The majority of the money spent is to purchase equipment. You already have a conference room, do you not? You can't move the equipment, the existing equipment, and to this new room and purchase a few new chairs. Yes, but we need the facilities. The table is much too small to accommodate the needs there. That resembles, it looks like what we have in similar type rooms on that floor. So let's say $2,000 or $3,000. Would that be enough? $2,000 or $3,000? Well, both of the walls are window pane that look onto the back of the building. We have fairly important meetings inside, so I don't think it would be an option we should take a look at. We want to come up with a professional looking and feeling room. All those in favor then carried. Let's go on now to boundary road agreements. Canaan Road. Mr. Lalonde. The Committee of the Whole recommends that Council adopts a bylaw to authorize the signature of boundary road agreement with the City of Ottawa for the maintenance of Canaan Road, seconded by Councillor Levert. Questions? Councillor Guillemard, if I understand correctly, there's nothing firm on paper, and that's why we want something very concrete on paper. That's right. All those in favor, by the way? Mr. André Lalonde. Now, how are your discussions going along with the county's representatives so that potentially they might take this road over, that they potentially should take over? I asked them to do so. This coming Wednesday will be the first meeting of the infrastructure committee, and I asked them that there be there'd be a turning lane there. The Christine Serro's daughter was involved in an accident, so we need to build a training lane there. How about the academy, the hockey academy? Well, we'll close up that meeting, and people will enter in to the academy by car. I'm entirely in agreement with that. Yes, I agree, and I believe that when council had started, I'd come up with a proposal for that, dealing with county road provisions. I like that idea, but we might run the risk of counties saying that we want this road to be widened. Well, I asked the road superintendent that this be done, so did we also ask that a yellow line be painted alongside? There are too many accidents there, so we have to make a major move to correct this situation. Fine. Now, Mr. Mayor, I asked a lot of questions with regard to Canaan. Well, we're very busy actually with Highway 17 and snowplows involved. We don't have all that good a service that we can afford to anyone, but we'll revisit this. Now, Canaan Road, now the bottom of the hill, that belongs 100% to Ottawa. Yes, that's right. It belongs to Ottawa. That's right. Monsieur, yes, sir. I just like to confirm that, yes, this falls within Ottawa's jurisdiction, but this particular agreement applies to the whole length of the road there. From a legal standpoint, our residents, as long as they live along that road, should have a safe environment, should be afforded a safe environment. And I'd ask that a street light be put up along Canaan Road. There is one street light. No, there's not even a street light there. It's at Millhaven. So I believe that at the corner of Baseline and Canaan, there should be a street light be put up. No, so the counties should put up a light? No, it's our responsibility to put up a light, because we're talking here about our property. And people make use of this road to access Morse project, to avoid going through the 54 traffic lights in Rockland. Well, the 304 traffic lights there. There's a lot of traffic. Let's just put it 40 or so. Look, the 42 minutes is the amount of minutes to go through from one end to the other. If you have an extra light, in the garage that's laying around there, we can make use of it then. Let's go on now to tender awards. Water rescue vessel. We recommend that Council authorize the award of tender to Polaris Inflatables Incorporated in the amount of $65,718 plus HST, $66,901 FOB Rockland. I don't know what FOB Rockland means. And further, that Council hereby authorizes administration to issue a purchase order to Polaris Inflatables Incorporated for $65,718 plus HST, and further, the committee recommend that council hereby direct funds for this purchase to come from the equipment reserve, $45,000, and the vehicle reserve, $21,901. Seconded by Councillor Levert. Questions? Councillor Berlinguet. Now, I'd understood last time around that we'd approved up to a maximum of $65,000 that would be supported by the sale of other equipment, generators, and we haven't sold the boat, right, until we get the other one. Correct. The email went to the manager yesterday and today for the generator and pictures and stats for the generator. If it's not up today, it should be up very, very soon with an idea of selling the generator. And the intention behind the report that was approved by council was that we were going to sell the current boat once the new boat comes in. We asked for a fair deal then, but in hindsight, well, they only had one tender that came back. There's only one company really that deals in that type of material. If we have another flood this spring, we're going to need a better boat than one we had last time. I think that based on the standards that you're required to have and to adopt by a fire department, there are certain standards that you make use of to purchase rescue and water rescue equipment. There are two that came back. There are two, Mr. Mayor. We had two companies that submitted bids. There was a third that had engaged in. There were questions back and forth, and they wound up not submitting a bid with that. The boat that we went out for is well suited to meet our needs and should last us for a long, long time to come. We tried to get council approval to try and take advantage of 2017 pricing because our procurement policy requires us to put it out for a certain number of weeks. It would carry us out to 2018, and we got caught in the 2018 motor aid increase, so the price of the motor went up a little bit, which pushed us over the amount that was originally approved by council. I mean, there are a handful of companies that build a good quality rescue vessel that would last us the lifespan that we hope to get out of this boat, but there are other companies that may make a boat that may not last as long, susceptible to damage, and we're trying to find a compromise. This company is the same company that builds vessels for Ottawa. Ottawa built boats from that same company. I've used boats from this company from when I was working with other fire departments. They build quality boats. Yes, the point I was going to make was this. Even if council approves this tonight, we will not take delivery until July. So if you want us to get back out and get pricing, we'll be getting the boat in November about that, because it takes time to build the boat. Any other questions? Councillor Levert, I was speaking to Mr. Wilson about this, and anything that the municipality has to sell because it's paid by tax dollars has to go to Crown Assets, right? No, it doesn't. I'm sorry, our procurement policy dictates a process for disposition of assets. So our procurement manager deals with the disposition of city assets, and I believe that he uses this provision for that. It's like Crown Assets. It's like Crown Assets, that's right. It's a first step, if you wish, of the process. Councillor Lalonde, I'm just wondering the following. There's no place for our local places like Rockland Marine or Charette. I'm surprised that you cannot get the equipment from there because they do sell Polaris equipment. And when I look at the delivery date, well, that is special, of course, but they have access. And also, like you mentioned, Crown Assets nearly always have that. I checked this week and there were two boats on there, one 14-footer and an 18-footer. Well, there aren't much available anymore. If you're going to buy used, you're going to have wear and tear from services that got rid of them. Well, with the government, it's rare that it's in bad use. It's in a bad state of repair if you're dealing with the government. But the fact, and one reason that I think we can get more tendering or get involved in more tendering is that we are involved with Merckx. And Merckx, Mr. Mayor, you were with me the day that car dealerships said, I'm not registered with Merckx. They could not see the benefit. Very few people are registered with Merckx. Very few. Mr. Wilson, to the councillor's point, Mr. Mayor, I know that the question was proposing a Yamaha motor instead of a Merck, and I believe that we had said that we would be amenable to that, provided it was the same quality, the same horsepower, and similar type of spec. but I believe that we would said that we would be open to that in the addendum. Don't quote me on that. I know the question came up. I know that it was a response. Like I said, we worked with a company, one of the companies that was going to submit to try and see what they recommended. There was a price benefit to getting involved with a Merck as opposed to a Yamaha. So, well, you say Mercs. Mercs. Oh, that's a 10-year thing. I thought you were talking about a Merc, a motor. Sorry. I believe it was posted on Mercs, MERX there, government's posting site. That's what I'm saying. Very few people take a stern look at Mercs or a close look. And the only thing I was looking at, $6,000 for delivery, it's in BC. How far is Chicago from here, just as an example? I've never been to Chicago. My car came from Chicago. It cost me $1,500 to have it shipped. But this is BC. Is it further? So, my car was brought to me on a float. Well, the boat we purchased is from BC. But $6,000 for shipping. You have to put it on a float. You need to insure this. Look, all the numbers are there, Mr. Lalonde. We were given a report as to that also. So, what can I say? Mr. Wilson, Mr. Mayor, I'm just going to address a couple of questions. One is on the shipping costs. The person that bid suggested the shipping price was $4,500. That's conclusive in our recommendation. We did try to price it in our own shipping in hopes to come up with less than $4,500. The cheapest then that we came up with was $6,500. We might have contemplated in towing it back, but the deal is that we were not going to be further ahead. At the end of the day, this is the recommendation. To the councillor's question, there aren't all that many. There is a handful of companies that are in the basement of making water rescue vessels, inflatable ones. There are a number of companies that make salt-fall inflatables. It's like a tube with a sheeting at the bottom. The risk is if you use it in a flood and if there's potential debris floating in the river, that you have catastrophic damage to your vessel if you strike a log or happen to scrape a rock or something. So from a fire department's perspective, the best boat that we can get is something with an aluminum hull with inflatable tubes on the side. So it will take the hopefully unavoidable risk or avoidable risk of bumping on a rock or bumping against something. There's only a handful of companies that make those. Councillor Levert, maybe to answer Mr. Lalonde's question, I did talk to the dealers. And he knew, the dealer that I spoke to was aware of what our need was, but he was not interested because he couldn't supply what we needed. Fine, let's go on to the vote. All those in favor? Carried then. Thank you. Let's go on now to the policy of powers and duties in regards to delegation. Councillor Berlinguet. Yes, Mr. Mayor. The Committee of the Whole recommends that Council adopts the policy number ADM 2018-03 with regard to delegation of powers and duties. Seconded by Councillor Grimard. Any questions as to this? All those in favor? Yes, well, thank you. Let's go on now to the renewal of drainage superintendent contract. Whereas the Committee of the Whole recommend to Council to adopt the bylaw to authorize the signature of the agreement with Leroux Consultant and assign Mr. Eric Leroux as drainage superintendent so that he may perform the job that is required of him as imposed upon him by the Drainage Act 1990. I believe that this individual knows everything and anything that needs to be known with regards to draining. Questions? Mr. Lalonde, I know that we discussed this with Mr. Darche prior to you, but we'll certainly review the drainage requirements throughout the municipality from top to bottom. Do you think it would be a good idea to include this individual in the review team because, as you stated, Mr. Mayor, this man has a lot of experience, and at $58 an hour, it's going to be much cheaper than to hire an engineer to make use of our resources to do the work that needs to be done. Did you ever think of making use of this individual? Yes. To answer this question, Mr. Mayor, we did consider it, and definitely we'll make use of his expertise when we can. But his knowledge is limited to municipal drains, but not to the general drainage needs throughout the municipality. He bases himself on the analysis that was performed by an engineering firm, and he's not the one that performs this analysis. Well, I tried. All those in favor then carried. Let's go on now to the amendment to the credit policy on ice rental rates for minor associations, community tournaments. Councillor Lalonde. Whereas Town Council has mandated community services to modify the policy with regards to credits for ice rental rates to accommodate minor association hockey tournaments in between the 1st of March and the 15th April to be eligible to the credit. Be it resolved that the Committee of the Whole recommend to Town Council that it adopt the modifications brought to policy LOI 2017-01 as being the policy that will be enacted to establish guidelines for the ice rental rates credit policies for minor associations. If I take a look at the criteria, all profits need to be brought back to the community, and the tournament needs to be open to all citizens of Clarence and Rockland. Yes, it's a community tournament. That's what it implies. So that means you can play. You can play at Councillor Lalonde. I can, huh? Maybe as a goaltender, who knows? Well, let's say if someone has been awarded a minor hockey league award, if anyone steps forward to obtain a grant, we should ask that entity or that person what his financial report, so that we can determine where that money goes to. There are some people that have solicited money from Town Council, and teams pay up to $600 to take part in a tournament. And where does the money go? Mr. Joubinville, there's a clause in our policy that states that municipality reserves the right to ask for financial statement for all money that it gives out to support. So we can ask a team to submit us with a financial report. Well, fine then. I will be back with a resolution. All those individuals involved, even 10 years ago, minor hockey league folks there were still owing an outstanding amount of $10,000 to $12,000. Well, this should be applied to everyone asking money, not necessarily to the minor hockey league folks. All those in favor? Other items, if you have any questions? Let's start with Councillor Lalonde. He's always first. He's always first. Go ahead, Andre. Let's go around the table. I have to come up with, I have to pinpoint where my questions are. Fine. Sir, if I can refer to what the St. Felix delegation mentioned to us. There's an enormous budget set aside for the repair of culverts. Can we not check up on culverts and determine those that can be repaired next year instead of this year, and to obtain money from the available budget to help out people along the St. Felix? Well, there are some major culverts that needed to be repaired last year that we delayed repair on until this year. Well, let's just make sure that we rework that 1.5 kilometer that was alluded to. Well, Mr. Levert, let me just I can guarantee you that those roads that will be worked by 2018 are those that are supported by our consultant's analysis that inspects culverts of a certain dimension. So it stands to reason that those culverts that will be repaired this year have attained and gone over and beyond their life expectancy right now. We can may take a look at what can be done, but the plan has already been approved along with the concepts inherent to them. Well, I'm in agreement with you on that plan, but we can still take a decision that's contrary to the plan. If we can free up a culvert to help out the St. Felix people, it's important to look upon this plan as not being something that is imposed upon us as a Bible, an absolute document that we need to adhere to, that we need to respect. It's a 10-year guide, but if we can delay work on a given culvert, then let's do so. But I also think, if I take a look, for example, at the Butler venue, we'll be spending $1.5 million to repair 3 culverts in that area. Those are cement culverts, prefabricated culverts. However, if you take a look at the metal culverts that had been there, they'd been there for the past 66 years. They had a lengthy life expectancy. Now, I spoke with the representative of the Saludo company. They do manufacture enormous culverts made out of plastic. Now, Mr. Mayor, I'd mentioned to you the possibility of revising. Take a look at what can be done to save money on this $1.5 million allocation that has been set aside to repair those and replace those 3 culverts in that particular area. Well, Mr. Mayor, of course, we've realized savings. We're dealing with culverts here that are paid for by that we can finance through debt emission, but maybe we can take a look at the possibility of savings to cater to the needs of the folks on St. Felix Street. As Mr. Grimard has stated, another solution was to repave one end of a street to another, or different streets. An extraordinary example would be this, the paving of a given street from one end to another could be delayed. For example, Laurier Street. I know that Laurier is not in a horrible shape. One can travel fairly well on that particular road. We can modify the plan, but an example, the money that could be put onto Laurier for this year could be put elsewhere. We don't need to pave Laurier from one side to another this year. It doesn't have to be done this year. Mrs. Collier? Well, I think that we need to take a holistic view of this. We have a 10-year plan with a large number of projects in there. So I think that we need to think about it. To cherry pick one, we need to come back to you on this. I'm just using that as an example, as something that doesn't need to be done soon. I think that we have to keep in mind that we had over 40 people that came here tonight, and we have to take that into consideration as we go forward. Now, look, it's nice to say that we rely on a petition, but let's take as an example the following. We can address a given problem, but we are removing something contained in the plan someplace else. And then you'll wind up with another delegation of 40 individuals that was subject to this removal, saying I was included in the original plans and I was omitted from the plan to accommodate others. But you see, we've addressed 4 important projects, and I believe that it's important to address situations, especially of those that attend before the council. Well, we had 3 delegations already. One with regard to Campo. We've had 3 delegations appearing before council. One before Campo, one with regard to the Saint Laurent area, and one from La Belle, Campo, Saint-Jacques. These are all delegations we've greeted, that we've received this year. Look, If we set aside projected paving works, then we can take money from another place, right? No, look, if we are facing 60 individuals that attend a meeting, we have to make a decision. There are as many individuals in another row that will be impacted that will have the same reaction. I'm entirely in agreement. Councillor Lalonde. Jeff Heald at the Roma conference made a very important announcement, and we should apply as soon as possible because there are already applications in. We could submit the application for paving the whole of Laurier Street and changing all of the lights there. The light, they're talking about $800,000. That was just for Main Street. That involved the $800,000 expenditure. I think that we had a grant. I gave it to Martin the other day. Well, it's to improve the commercial sector. Yes, Main Street. That's right. So we'll need to get involved in this as soon as possible because I know they've already started looking at submissions or requests. If we're talking about obtaining money, we might obtain money for Laurier Street. Mr. Belenguet, I'd like to give you a bit of an update, members of Council. You know that both projects for fire stations in Rockland and in Clarence Rockland and Bourget, should I say, are in a tender process. Tender process should end on the 8th of March. I'm taking a look as to what happened is that we've invited 6 general contractors and all questions were submitted to Jerry Lalonde. Let me read to you what's going on with first question. Questions submitted by whom? General contractors that were asked to take part in tender provisions. I don't know. Are they allowed to ask questions like this, by the way? Well, I don't think it can be televised right now. Well, this is on the website of the Ottawa Firefighters Association. This is an addendum. It is a list of questions asked by general contractors, and the city, in this case, responds or gives answers to those questions to clarify what's going on. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought this was the actual tender document. This is what's going on with the tender process. So, first question, the budget appears to be low. Those numbers appear to be accurate with regards to other similar projects. If the way price is submitted above the approved budget, will additional funding be sought or the project canceled? And the answer was that the city is committed to proceed with the project. And if we encounter over budget, city staff reserves the right to appear before council to obtain budget approval for increase. So they're already saying that it's already too low. How about having some submissions coming in first before saying it's going to be too low? Well, I know, but you have to wait for the whole procedure to be followed through. But we've already approved those projects, EMS, based on the budget. And the first question that we're getting is, are we going to contemplate an increase in the budget? Maybe we won't get such a great deal. We didn't do such a great deal or get such. You see, our budget is based. The lease agreement would be advanced on the certain price. It's based on construction costs, correct? Yes. And now they're saying, no, that's not enough. But we haven't seen any prices come back yet. Well, one contractor is saying, no, this is all of them saying this. They also said that the site plan is non-existent. The building approval project is ambitious. Is this a problem with Collier? No, these are people asking. No, I understand that. But the fact that they're actually criticizing the plan, which means now that Collier, which is the one that is in charge of making this plan, and they're asking Jerry Lalonde those questions? Yes. They're asking. They're also asking whether other areas are going to be considered. What they say is, we need money to develop an architectural team, because basically we gave them very simple floor plans. I've never seen that before. they're saying is that the information we got in a normal bidding process, you're getting specifications, you're getting full agricultural architectural drawing. We're asking them for a lump sum committed price without providing them with that. They're going to have to cover any shortfall. Mrs. Collier, you see, we have given adequate information. If they need more information, they have to specifically ask Jerry for more information. This is a Class D estimate that will come in for Council's consideration because if our budget is low, and you know what we base our budget on because we all approved that budget, Council then has to take into consideration. And you will get a full analysis as to why the budget is low. So if it's actual cost of the bricks, if it's higher, we will tell you. And that's what Collier's job is. They will go through the details. And you will know why the cost estimate is low. In terms of the information that they have to work with, we've hired Colliers, a professional firm that's done many buildings, and they've made sure that we had the information needed to get the proper tender. I don't believe it's there. There were many questions raised because of the fact that Bourget is going to be connected to a septic system. There's no sanitation source system. Many fire stations are on a septic system. We find this request very aggressive. Well, they're entitled to come back with anything. And as I said from the beginning, we should have hired a firm to prepare proper documents. You know, otherwise we wind up with this. Well, I wish we'd wait until we get one price and then move on from there. You know, I'm just giving you an idea as to what we expect. He's bringing up a point maybe that the information was not provided adequately, and therefore the companies will have to take steps to protect themselves. Well, we can go and verify this. My question is that why is this question being brought back to Jerry instead of the company? We are paying to manage this contract. Why are the questions sent from Jerry to Collier? Well, the process is that Collier is acting as a project manager and asking, I guess, in a way, a third party agent for the city. It's like having an employee of the city. That's the agreement with Colliers. At the end of the day, they're not supposed to make decisions with regards to procurement or procurement piece. So all questions for someone building for the fire station come through the procurement manager. They then distribute those questions. I've been privy to a lot of those questions coming in, as had Colliers, depending on the nature of the question. The answers are then given back to Jerry to make sure that they're sent back to all bidders and not just one, because everyone has to have the same information. There were a number of copies of those that attended, given to those that attended the site in Rockland. There were a number of people that asked questions with regard to process or amounts of information or whatever. I was assured several times over that this is in fact that we'll probably have more information that is customary in a design build process that is different than coming out with a set of plan and saying, well, I'm going to build this building. The design build process says, you know, you might have another vision. Hey, what if you do this? If you go to tender with architectural drawings, you're saying, I don't want any other ideas. I want you to build this. And so the design build process allows for some creativity, some ingenuity, some potential cost savings, and how this structure is put together, particularly in Rockland. We're looking at blending old with new, the old station with the new station, and how it's going to look. If we wanted to go via a more traditional route, I guess, and I know that Ottawa has done this with their fire stations, they might come up with architectural drawings, or they would go through a competitive process and ask architectural firms to submit completed drawings with their bid. There's a significant cost there, and the winner of such processes are required to pay the losers in a bidding process to cover costs for doing drawings. It's a lazier process entirely. It stretches the entire thing out because everyone has to be mindful of the drawings in advance before submitting a bill. So the suggestion from Colliers to come up with timelines was to resort to a design-build process where we say yes, agreeably, there are some variables there, and what we're asking companies is to come up with some ideas, some creativity. We've given them some suggestions with regards to floor plans, but they have the expertise to potentially suggest something different. We're open to the idea. Well, here's the question that I'm asking then, and I'd let the city is not prepared to offer stipends to contractors to prepare proposals. We've spent all our money on Collier, so we're expecting bidders to carry that. Please clarify how the city expects to come up with options at 3 or 5% with regards to price tags when the final option will be decided after the contract has been awarded and decide what lump sum of the project wishes to be fast tracked. And that's what I said. These are all design needs. You're pushing things through. It's fast tracks. Things are forgotten at that point in time. So I'm just reading comments from contractors who are required to bid on this. I've spoken to individuals on this, and they don't see this as a responsible way of going about things. Well, I don't know if you're supposed to talk to the committee that's submitting. No, I met someone on a completely different subject, and I asked them, what are you guys involved in? He says, oh, well, we're involved with something in the East End and fire stations. And then they just dropped casually into the conversation with regard to our fire station. The last conversation that we had at council was with regard concerning fire station was basically like a brainstorming session. Can we reduce square footage and so on and so forth? I remember hearing what were the costs, and Collier's was right there. 1,000 square foot less, let's say. What about solar panels on the roof? To contrast the to offset the electricity costs. But we've never heard back from the tenderer. Now, is the tender on a full size or on 1,000 square foot less? Is it on solar panels? Why did we not ask them to bid on that? I'm a little confused. Okay, the fire station budgets were approved, and the decision was made to reduce by $500,000 the overall envelope. That's where we ended up. So how does that translate into square footage? I just want to know. I don't have that number in front of me right now, but well, we're at 300 square feet right now. Mr. Wilson, after council, at that meeting when the fire station budget was approved, I wasn't here, but my deputy was. Based on the results of that meeting, we did work extensively with Colliers to reduce the square footage side to try to meet the approved budget envelope. Based upon Colliers has with regards to other design-based projects, such as Pembroke, such as a number of others. All those fancy pictures that we saw. Yes, to try to come up with what we expect that we're going to see for bids back here. And the last information that I have here is that there are a number of companies, several, that have shown interest in bidding for our project, and we're expecting to obtain bids back from. But based on the conversation, it seems as if it's well, I don't have the exact straight footage. I know we based it, Councillor, on what we discussed on during the course of the last conversation we entered into, and we had to reduce the required square footage to meet our budgetary needs. This was was relayed to Colliers, yes. And they have to come back with ideas now, don't forget. But there are no specifications. We gave these contractors basically the cold shoulder as to what additional specifications are. But it's too late. We're into the tender process right now. I also am under the impression that anybody wants to put bids on there. If they want to obtain clarification, they call Collier. And if Collier doesn't have an answer, he will contact our procurement person. It's like if I'm hiring a lawyer, the company is not going to call me, but they're going to call my lawyer. The same rule applies to engineers. Collier was hired by the municipality. They're the ones to answer the bidders. Mr. Mayor, if I may, It's the same process as any other tender the city does. The proper process from any other questions coming in from outside companies is to come through the procurement officer, in this case Jerry Lalonde, who then distributes this question to the most appropriate priority that provides an answer, and then is relayed back to the procurement individuals. Or it's same thing as what we've dealt with in the past with procurement, dealing with different companies that we've called upon to deal with in the past through the tender process. All I'm saying is this, folks. You know, I think that we're proceeding. I think that these guys involved in the tender process are given a minimum amount of information. We're trying to rush it through. This is the point I'm getting at. I'm making. But this is a process we have all approved. I gave it to Colliers, and now it's going to come back. We might ask Collier to come down next week and give us a presentation or an update as to what's going on. It wouldn't be a bad idea. Yeah. Any other questions then? Councillor Lalonde? Councillor Zant? Mrs. Collier, as you're aware, and I'm sure that all department heads are aware of the same thing, we have a bylaw in Clarence and Rockland that all signage on businesses need to be bilingual. Who's responsible? Which department is responsible to make sure that businesses ensure that signage is bilingual? There's a dentist now operating in the plaza where the Domino's is, the Crossroads Ultramar, and their sign is English only. So who's going to go and tell that individual, you're in contravention of a bylaw and the onus is upon you to pay to have your signage changed, when it ought to have been done? It could have been done by the construction people or the bylaw people, but someone along the line issues an okay for improperly designed signage. Well, the information is included in permit issuance documents. Well, I believe that land planning and management oversees this, and if not, well, the bylaw enforcement gets involved. Yes, but they pay $5,000-$6,000 to put up the chain. But they are aware. They are aware that this signage needs to be bilingual. But is it just a spoken directive given to them? No, it's included in the contract with regard to the issuance of a business license for anyone dealing in business in the city of Clarence and Rockland. Well then, I guess that the bylaw enforcement officer should pay them a visit to have them switch their sign to reflect a bilingual aspect. I hate that we have to resort to this. Maybe they should be given an update or a reminder, but this signage has to be modified. Well, whenever they, of course, advertise in media, they don't have to be bilingual. No, the sign law would not apply to advertisement taken out in media. Should the business name be bilingual? No. This should be reflected strictly on their business sign that is put up in the city of Clarence and Rockland. I believe that their business name is their trademark name, which is the name of their corporation, which is not necessarily bilingual, but the signage, if they want to say that they're a business for computers, it should state then computers and ordinateur in French. McDonald's saying, we're hiring in English on both signs, and those things need to be spotted by our bylaw enforcement officers. I understand there's a lot of signage out there. Well, I know that the bylaw enforcement officer was going around because the corner store next to Jean Coutu did receive a visit from a bylaw enforcement officer, and he told me that he had to change his sign. I know that the challenge is this: existing or pre-existing signs before the bylaw was enacted, right, wrong, or different, are grandfathered in. I understand this, but it's important to preserve the French language here. And I have another question here, Mr. Mayor. The parking bylaw Now we've asked for over a year now an update from the for parking bylaws. Who's in charge of drafting this? I am. I know you're busy with an election coming, but I drawn up a map with what's existing right now. You should have received that last. Well, I started work on this last week, so it's progressing. So within the next 3 months, we'll receive something. Yes, certainly. Now, Le Chateau Road. We talked about this. The Chateau Road. It's kind of in the hands. It's privately owned, but no one knows who owns it. What's that? Yeah, we do know who owns it. Well, last time I had a conversation with these folks, we didn't know who owned it. So when can we move forward with some sort of resolution to bring them in as a public road? Well, we're finalizing things right now. We have to define the extent of ATG and CIH, their involvement. Mr. Needs has all of the information required to proceed with this. Is there anyone else that could potentially move this forward on your behalf? I'm thinking that you're very busy. I don't know if this is CAO level. It could be departmental level. We're talking here about an easement. Well, I don't know if it is an easement issue. Look, I mean, right now, the important thing that's happening is if something happens to those water pipes, we have agreed to fix those water pipes, right? And that's the critical thing to do right now with Du Château and Voisine. Now, the actual acquisition of the land, and I'm trying right now to manage the time of our manager of planning so that all he'll be working on will be planning stuff because these things can soak up a ton of time. It's definitely on the list to work on. And I thought we'd had finalized it, but there are two or three more things to do. Okay, it's coming though. Talking about the parking bylaw. Last year we passed a motion. Yes. Oh, we're going to revisit this now because you spoke about the bylaw. Yes, yes. We passed a motion last year concerning parking on heritage. I'm not asking that the sign be put up this year in the winter, but if people are parking there, I hope they won't get a ticket. The guy asked me the other day if I parked along there, am I going to get a ticket? We had said yes in making the 2 lanes of heritage parking. I'm just curious as to why the sign wasn't changed. It's been what, 4 or 5 months? Well, plenty of time was afforded for the change to have been made or implemented. It might not have gone all the way. Anyone else? Mr. Lanark, Mr. Belinguet, and I share Caron Street as a main artery in our ward, as well as Councillor Zant. Yes, and now the east side, there's a huge bicycle path there during the summertime, and it's not snowplowed or there's no snow removed during the wintertime to have people walk on this. You need an operational estimate, is what you told us. All we're asking is that both people be able to walk on both sides of Caron Street. It's a main artery. Now, on the east side, where Mr. Belinguet and Mr. Zant is, now this sidewalk is an extraordinary bicycle path. But during the wintertime, snow should be removed from that area is to allow people to walk there during the summer, the wintertime. So we need to assess this. I mean, all you need to do is to put the grader in there, and that's it. Mr. Mayor, there are the components with regards to legality and minimum requirements. A bicycle path is not dealt with in the same way as a sidewalk will be dealt with. A bicycle path needs to meet the same standards as roadway maintenance standards. So we might change this designation as a multi-service path rather than a bicycle path. Well, the way in which the bicycle path right now is designated prevents us from doing this. All I would like us to do is to at least clear snow the width of at least one proper sidewalk. People have to cross there with their baby carriages and their children. Doesn't They have to cross the street? Doesn't Because they have no access to this potential sidewalk. They walk along the street from Caron right up to Highway 417. Doesn't make any sense. That's it. Anything else? Mr. Mayor, I would have a question. Oh, she would have a question. Well, well. With regard to Bylaw 68, or Bill 68, I'm sorry, Bill 68. I'm just wondering if members of council would be interested in attending a training session that would be given by a representative of the Ministry of Housing. Yes, with regard to the new designation, the new law. Yes, it would include also changes with regard to the Election Act and the nomination of an integrity commissioner that should be mandatory as of 2019. New policies that need to be adopted as of 2019 also. Fine. We don't need a special presentation. We might ask the clerk to give us highlights. Well, I've already submitted individual reports to all of you concerned that deals with the highlights of such changes. If you're interested in attending this particular workshop that I'm proposing to you, fine. Yes, certainly. We might start at 5 p.m. at night, 5 o'clock at night. Ministry representative, sure, and then finish up at what, 12 midnight? I just realized that that we're getting close to quitting time here. All right, so adjourned at 10:45.